All right, rolling along here on this Tuesday. We'll get back to the football. We will get back to the football as we roll along. But there is a basketball game today. Here's the most amazing thing so far about the Fran Brown experience and people's excitement around it right now. There was a basketball game on Saturday. Syracuse went to Virginia and what's the word? Got annihilated. Is that the nice way of saying what happened on Saturday? Yeah, I think that's the nice way of saying what happened on Saturday. Syracuse got annihilated. There's a game tonight in the Dome, home game. And yeah, we'll do our whole coverage. So we'll do a pregame show, the whole deal. But normally, basketball game day this time of year, we're all in on the hoops. But today, with the football going on, we're doing a little mix and match. With that, we'll bring on our first guest today. He is a veteran of this radio station, a former host of Newhouse at Night in previous years. Now he does, among other things, calls Cornell games for ESPN Plus. We welcome in our guy Johnny Gadamowitz. What's up, Johnny? Thanks for hopping on today.
Hey, Brian, how are you? I appreciate you having me on the show.
Yeah, I'm glad you could come on here and inform us a little on the Big Red, because don't look now, but Cornell is 7-1 here and off to their hottest start in a long, long time. What has intrigued you? What have you seen out of this Brian Earl squad so far this year?
Yeah, it's certainly a squad that is not to be taken lightly. I mean, you talk about the second time in the last 3 years they've gotten out to this 7-1 start. But I think the word that comes to mind for me is unique. This is a Big Red squad that is unlike any team that Syracuse has seen yet this year, in that they play a lot of guys. They're content to go 4, 5, even more deep off the bench. They've got 10 guys that play at least 9 minutes per game. No showstoppers, but a lot of guys who are going to give you quality minutes. They love to push the tempo. They'll press not only after they make shots, they'll press sometimes even after they miss shots, which you don't see a ton of. So it's a little bit of a wild card. Picked to finish third in the Ivy League, and for good reason. They bring back a lot of returners, and, certainly going to be interesting to see how the Cuse respond to kind of just a different style of play, kind of similar to Colgate, I'd say, from earlier in the year, but almost on steroids, if you will.
Yeah, certainly with the tempo, and then, diametrically opposed to what they just saw in Virginia, tempo-wise, who loves to slow it down as much as anybody. You mentioned some of the stats before we get into some of the names we'll see tonight, and I don't think this segment could be long enough to get into all of the names we'll see tonight. I'm looking it up. I'm looking at the stats. I'm like, was there an error with the stat software? There's too many names here. Like, why are there so many people? There are 14 different guys on the team that have hit a 3 this year, and beyond that play. This is kind of wild. Like, do they have, Johnny, like a group they rely on, do you think? Or is it too soon to know? Like, what is up with all these guys?
I think that's what a big part of this non-conference portion of the schedule is about for Brian Earl, in terms of just experimenting, right? Mixing and matching, figuring out which groups of 5 can work. Now, what I will say is that they almost kind of play positionless basketball. And to sort of answer your question, Brian, I'm not sure it even really matters so much, because they have so many guys that can play anywhere from the 1 through the 4 on the court. They don't really have a true 5, so to speak. That's certainly something I'll be keying in on tonight when you talk about Naheem McLeod having a size advantage. But, it's interesting in that so many guys can step outside and shoot. They take and make a lot of threes at that, but it's not even just from beyond the arc, too. This team is second in the nation from inside the arc, 2-point field goal percentage. They get opposing defenses to pay so much attention to just closing out on shooters that they'll go to work in the mid-range as well, and obviously with the tempo they play, they get a lot of easy looks right at the rim as well.
Yeah, 6 guys on the team are basically averaging between 9 and 13 points a game. I'm not sure I've really ever seen anything that looks quite exactly like that. Sean Hansen is the leading scorer. I guess if there is a big-ish guy, it's kind of Hansen at 12.5 points a game. What kind of guy is he?
Yeah, he's the guy that probably is the showstopper, so to speak, in terms of if there's someone you really want to try to shut down. What's interesting is, I mentioned that they don't really have a true five. They'll play Hansen at the five. They'll roll him out there with another guy by the name of Guy Ragland Jr., who's 6'8", Hansen himself 6'9". So, again, not a ton of height. But when they go with both Hansen and Ragland, that's a lot of physicality down low. One of the games I did last week, Cornell hosted Monmouth, and Hansen he's a warrior. He took a scratch to the face towards the end of the first half. And was worse for wear from it and had to come out for a moment later and was all bandaged up. We weren't sure if we were going to see him coming out of the gate in the second half, and sure enough we did, and he went on to piece together a pretty nice, consistent half number two as well. So he doesn't demand the ball, and he doesn't need the ball in his hands to fill the role that Brian Earl wants him to fill, but he's definitely someone from a Syracuse standpoint that is worthy of keying in on.
Yeah, absolutely. He's the leading scorer. That's not by accident, but again, it's so bunched up. He's at 12.4 points a game. There's five other guys within like 3 points a game of him for the team lead right now, and one of them, the second leading scorer, is Cooper Nord. He is among the many three-point shooters on this team. He is the most proficient right now. He's nearly making 50% from three at a pretty decent clip. What kind of guy do Syracuse fans need to watch out tonight for in Nord?
He's fun to watch, and what's crazy about Nord is, when you asked about Hansen a couple of moments ago, Hansen is part of a group of this heavy senior class that had their freshman year wiped out due to COVID when the Ivy didn't play, and is, kind of gone through the system together, so to speak. Nord is sort of a youngster amongst the rest of the pack, only played about 5 minutes per game as a freshman a year ago, but always had the three-point shot in his arsenal, obviously. This year, he's taken off. He's taken the bull by the horn, so much so to a point where, a guy like Nazir Williams, a veteran guard on this team, somewhat of a local product from Nyack down in Westchester, and all Ivy League honorable mention a year ago, Nord has sort of ushered Nazir Williams' way out of the starting lineup. And again, I'm not sure there's a starting five that matters less in the country than this Cornell team when you talk about some of the minutes distributions. But that's how impactful Cooper Nord has been. Loves to get up and down the court, a lot of transition looks. And something that I think is really interesting, too, from a Syracuse standpoint is how do you counter that, right? Like, obviously, we know this is a Syracuse team that has tempo and likes to run the floor. I almost think it's twofold in terms of they can take one of two different approaches. They can try to limit Cornell's possessions, right, in terms of trying to work it deep into the shot clock. And, granted, the more possessions Cornell gets, the more points they're going to put up in all likelihood. So do they sort of revert from their style and try to get the Big Red uncomfortable and play out of pace, or do they try to beat them at their own game, so to speak, and win a 90-85 shootout if that's how it ends up unfolding?
Yeah, I'm kind of leaning toward the latter happening. I think, Johnny, this could be, and Johnny Gadamowitz, who calls Cornell games for ESPN Plus, is our guest. I think this could be just a comically high-paced game because, Johnny, and for those that don't know, Johnny also hosts the Red is the New Orange podcast on part of the Field of 68. So talking Cuse basketball, Cuse plays better fast. Cornell plays only fast. I don't really see any way I don't really see any way either team would prefer to slow it down tonight.
Right. And again, that brings in a whole nother level of the conversation, too, of, okay, we haven't necessarily seen the Cuse be content with a revolving door of rotation players as far as minutes go. Is it the kind of situation where, okay, early in the second half, mid-second half, guys are starting to get gassed? Guys are starting to get winded, right? What can we expect from the Benny Williams and Justin Taylors of the world if Cornell continues to swap guys out, which we know they will? It's going to be a revolving door of minutes. They're going to keep the legs fresh. And again, I go back to Syracuse has not seen that yet this year. So I almost wonder from a stamina standpoint, right, what the Orange can bring to the table. How is Naheem McLeod going to be utilized tonight? He has a 5-inch advantage on their big guys, right? But can you run him up and down the floor for more than 3 or 4 minutes at a time? I'm not so sure.
Yeah, I got a feeling, he might get a couple of dunks early, then give way to Malik Brown for a decent chunk of this
Right.
game. And, before I get your thoughts on the Orange and what you've seen from Syracuse so far this year, Johnny, we've heard from Brian Earl. He was on Orange Nation earlier today. For those that missed it, I'll play some of that back coming up on the pregame show later tonight. And we've heard from him over the years. You mentioned the 2020 COVID season. That was like the hinge point recently in Cornell basketball history. Like Earl was the coach back. They had Matt Morgan, who's done unbelievable overseas. That's when Jimmy Boeheim was playing there. They played, quote unquote Ivy League ball, right? It was slow, it was stodgy, it was back cuts, it was, everything you'd expect from the Ivy League. Like, has Earl come around to what he's doing yet? It still doesn't sound like he's quite comfortable leaning into how he's turned this into, up tempo run and gun.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I think it was during Ivy League Media Day before the season started when somebody asked him, look, you guys are so different stylistically, and that's so different than historically speaking what the Ivy League is. And Earl himself, a former Princeton guy, Ivy League Player of the Year in the late 90s, for them to be so different and stick out like a sore thumb, it is something that definitely raises a lot of eyebrows. But I loved his response. He said, well, look, somebody's got to do it, right? Everybody's doing the same thing. We've tried that formula. It hasn't worked for us. We're going to try something different and see if it sticks. And ever since that's sort of been the philosophy and the mantra of the style of play that they like to run, it's done them plenty of favors. I mean, look, do they leave a lot to be desired defensively? Sure. Are they going to turn it over because of how fast they play? Obviously, they're averaging over 15 turnovers a game. If you were to ask Earl, that's a number he wants to see significantly cut down on, I'm sure. But at the end of the day, they've really embraced it, and they're making it a point to try to recruit to it, obviously, as well. And it's something that, for better or worse, it has kind of just become the identity of Cornell basketball over the course of the past few years.
Yeah, hey, I like it. It's a lot more fun than the other way. So let's have a little fun. Let's get up and down and see what happens. And you said it. They're picked third in the Ivy, so they'll be mixing it up with the Penns and the Princetons and the Harvards and all the schools that have dominated that league historically coming up here in a few weeks. But Johnny Gadamowitz is with us, and as said, you also do podcasts on Q's Hoops, and here we are, Johnny. What do you make of here we are, Red year one, Q's team 5-3. It's at its ups, it's at its downs. So how's it hit you so far this year?
Yeah, I mean, I think refreshing is a word that comes to mind, just as far as the differences that we've seen, particularly on the defensive end. And, I think all you got to do is go look at that LSU game in particular to see sort of what this team can be when it's at its best. And granted, LSU, a program that doesn't have a ton going for it right now, but the point still holds true. Obviously, Virginia, a little bit of a comeback, down to earth, reset your expectations, so to speak. But that's what this team is going to have to play up against on a consistent basis come ACC play. So I'm really interested to see how these next couple of weeks go. As far as the non-conference, just sort of finding your footing and finding that identity, right? I don't think anyone is asking you to have that identity figured out from day one, particularly in, year one of a new head coach. And you sort of use this portion of the schedule to, mix and match. And then you hope that you get into ACC play and you can hang with the big boys, so to speak. And, last week showed us that maybe they're not there yet, but I think baby steps is sort of, my takeaway thus far through the first month or so here.
Yeah, obviously Judah's been, he's been the star of the team so far, and that's not unexpected. He's coming off, without question, his worst game of the season. I'm just got to take a guess here, Johnny. Like, athletically, Judah versus what Cornell's got going on, this ain't a fair fight. Like, what might Judah be able to do against these guys tonight?
Yeah, he can really find a hole in the Cornell defense. What's interesting is, we were talking about this earlier in the week as well, just with various conversations. Who do you even put on Judah Mintz from a Cornell standpoint? And there's no great answer that comes to mind. But one guy who does bear mentioning is a guy by the name of Chris Mannon. Again, part of that loaded senior class that Cornell has right now. Set the single-season steals record for the Big Red a year ago. He's red hot to start this year in that department, too, averaging over 2 swipes per game. A lot of those will come in transition. So Does Cornell have the athleticism to keep up with Mintz and try to contain him? I think the short answer is no, but it's also a little bit deeper than that in my eyes of, okay, look, this is a Cornell team that is going to make you uncomfortable. Even if you have the clear advantage in the athleticism department, they're going to throw some wrinkles your way. You'll see a couple different looks defensively. I mentioned how they like to press both off of makes and misses. So I think for Judah, I'm really keying in on, those first 10 minutes of the first half, right? Can he kind of find his footing? Can he kind of find his groove? Or is this going to be so much of a wild card defense that, it's by the time he figures it out, it might be too late.
Man, I think this could be just a wild watch tonight if everybody, just jumps on the if you tell me the final score is like 100-82, I wouldn't be shocked by what we're to see tonight. All right, Johnny, good to catch up. We'll be watching your stuff calling Cornell games this year, and thanks for hopping on.
Hey, Brian, thanks so much. Appreciate you having me on.
All right.